two things that when I leave a property, I'm often asked, what is the first things you should do? And when my program, if you're familiar with it, or if you follow along, or if I've been to one of your properties, you know that my analysis package that I do is followed by a phase proposal with phases in it. So to the construction, putting in your water holes, doing hanging the licking branches, all of your stand locations already marked during the analysis package, but completing the whole package. And one of those phases is obviously hanging licking branches and water holes. And whether I do those or not, one thing that I highly recommend, and it is one of the simple phases for the customers to do, is I always recommend that the first two things that need to be done after I leave the farm and we know where your stand locations need to be, how to access, how to get in and out of those, the first two things that need to be done is, one, you need to get these 360-degree vertical licking branches hung. And the second thing is you need to get those water holes, if your property permits that you need those, which in a lot of cases do. I have been asked, along with that, I've been asked what's the number of water holes that I need, and that's all per property specific. It's just I've got a 80-acre parcel that I just did here in Michigan a couple weeks back, and that place it's actually got one of the highest points in the county. So in other words, it's high and dry, and it's very arid. It's an old pine tree plantation, and I have 4 different water holes on that 80 acres, and the reason is there's ag on both sides of it, and that whole farm is being used now from top to bottom, and it's just a way to place these water holes or these licking branches at the point of impact. That's what I always tell everybody. To me, no need to have one of these in a spot that you aren't able to hunt over. And the water holes are the same way. If they're going to go to find water, it's the same theory as having them go, if you don't have them at the point of impact, it's the same theory as having them go a half mile to get water, quarter mile, half mile, up to a mile sometimes. And the whole theory of putting them in is to create that point of impact, take 2, 3, 4 trails, whatever the case is, put that all that attention on one spot in front of you. And so back to the point there is making that point of impact 25, 27 yards from your stand locations. Now, I have quite a few of them that I design that end up being rifle blinds only, where it's just too close to a certain area, or the contour just doesn't permit. So it's a gun, let's say a shotgun or rifle setup only, but you can still cover them from a distance. Something like that, I don't promote them on the edge of food. The deer are already those destination feed locations are already established. The deer are going there for a reason, and that is predominantly your tonnage in your greens. And so what I do is to use these as an aid, is in the spectrum of hunting, is to use these as like I said, a point of impact at these stand locations, archery stands, and also gun stands. So you can just see that how I did this. This has been opened. This one's been here over a year now, and great success on it. We've had many of deer, mature bucks last year walk underneath it. My son was inches away from harvesting his largest deer off from it to date, 14 years old. It was a 3-year-old, and he would have been very, very pleased to send an arrow downrange at him, and learned a very valuable lesson, and was actually in the stand right back in there, and perfect wind, and just a wrong move in the stand ended up busting him, and it didn't turn out real well. So he learned. But I highly believe that if this setup right here, because of what it is, it's just off about 40 yards off from my fence row, and it's a hogback ridge that connects the ag to the east and the bedding area to the west. And now we've implemented another food plot down off the end of this ridge down by the ponds that you've seen in some of the videos. But this is a bypass, a transition area, has been for years. And it's just one of those spots that this was the thing to have in here, and it's worked flawlessly, worked great. A couple of the bucks that were using it last year during the season, some of the neighbors were successful, and so we're getting the cameras up and rolling. Actually, my phone's sitting on top of the trail cam right now that we're hanging. So why do I call them 360-degree licking branches? As you can see, this is a little bit more open. It's like a leased portion. You know, I just can't I can't go in and improve the habitat in this transition area like I would like to. So with that said, is what we do is we come in here and we open these scrapes up. I always, you know, June is my go time on these. The first couple of weeks of June, I find myself doing most of them and refreshing ones that were already active or hanging new locations. So that beech limb, it's you know, like I said, or that beech limb that's tied into it. But this is these are willow whips, cottonwood whips or willow whips that we're using, and I've been using those for the last couple of years, and I don't see any difference between those or the vines. 3/4 of an inch is the ticket. Don't get it any larger. I've made that mistake, and it's unnatural. It's too large, and they kind of steer from it. 4 to 5 foot long. As you can see, we suspend it. I hook that beech branch in, like I was saying. We suspend it, and then what I like to do is it's easier that way. You don't have to have the. I found this trick, you know, years ago. Is you don't have to have the ladder with you all the time, or if you can't reach off the back of your ATV when you're initially doing these, whatever the case is. I like to find the limb, and then what I do is I run that extra wire. I use the wire in this case, or the rope. I run those down to the nearest tree off to the side, and I tie those off. So you can, above deer heads, so you know the deer, nothing is going to get into them. You stand a chance of getting tangled up. But I tie them off there. That way, if I need to adjust the height of this, I just go over there. I don't have to put my human scent on this scrape at all. I just go to the tree, undo that, and I just use that as my anchor point, if you will. And I just, you know, the higher I raise that, the lower the scrape goes, and it seems to work great. This one here obviously is brand new, and I'll step back here, you know, and I'll show you. I say belt height, but I'm 6'6". I use the dimension of 3 foot, so I'll show you what this one here is. This is right here with me. It's just a little bit lower than the belt height, and that's where I like to run them. And the reason is you got to remember on these scrapes, when you're doing this through 360 degrees, like I said, it's a little bit open, but it has to be a spot where the deer can exit or enter and exit this from any direction. You don't just want it to be a pinch point or a funnel where they have to stick their nose in there. It's too tight. You want it. What your goal is these are hanging pretty much in the middle of they are hanging in the middle of the trails, and you're trying to just conjoin 3 or 4 trails. So the example last year there, between the water hole and that far, you can see the pine in the background there and that soft maple. Between there was 3 trails. As I just came up here before I refreshed on this, I kind of walked over to my old stand location and walked up here, and the only trails are all coming to this point of impact. Those trails through the end of last fall into early spring here, going into summer, those trails are completely shut down. There's not a track on them, and there's 3 trails coming from over the bank, and they're all ending up right here. Again, this is a ridge system that we're side accessing into, and all these trails are right at the point of impact right here, right at this mock scrape. So if you can, in these areas where you can implement the water, if the water is needed, it's a very powerful tool. It's kind of neat to watch this, and we're going to be bringing you some good summer, spring footage here. They don't use them nearly as much, the water holes, as they do going into fall, especially when things get dry. Now they're getting moisture off any green that they eat, any woody browse, all this stuff has got moisture in it, and this time of the year they're meeting their water intakes from all over, and they're venturing out a little bit farther to get the water because they feel comfortable and they're unpressured. When that goes into fall, that goes away, and these water holes start being more predominant and used more. And you'd think it'd be the other way around. When the hot summertime heat affects them, you'd think they'd be on this more, and it's completely the opposite. They actually use it more in the fall, hence the reason that they're so powerful. So if you can use them together, I always recommend 3 things. Hang the licking branch, make sure it's in the middle of the trail. 2, if there's a need for the water hole, put your water hole in. And the third thing is you have to have there's actually 4. The third thing is you have to have a camera on these locations, because the data that you're going to collect off these, what I refer to as my inventory sticks, the footage that you're going to collect is going to set the success rate going into the rest of your future. Your property all hinges right there on this setup, or just that licking branch alone. It will blow your mind how much these work. And the fourth thing is there, last but not least, is a perfect stand location. Always make sure to add these critter sticks in there. Piece of stick is about 3 to 4 foot long, depending on the size of the tank. You leave it out of the tank about 1 foot, and any critter that gets in there is able to get out. I've actually got 2 in this one pointing out both ends, and nothing's dead in it. And very, very powerful tool. So top 2 things that I always recommend when I leave a property is make sure you get these licking branches in, and make sure you get your water holes in, especially this time of the year, and get those cameras running. And we are starting the process outside of the mass food plot production plantings that are going on right now. The biggest tool that you need to do is get these point of impacts created, get these licking branches done. Now's the time to, when you're doing that, make a weekend of it, or make a project of it. Get the stands hung, or bring a climber in, or whatever the case is. Put your ladders in there if you don't want to leave your stands in the tree. Get up, trim your shooting lanes. Everything is good. Everything's green now. You can see what needs to be cut, what doesn't, and set the stage for the fall. Top 2 things that I always recommend when I leave a property after the analysis package is done. Thanks, guys.